few things going on. But Jason, what are your thoughts, reflections on the Trump presidency?
Look, it was without doubt a very interesting presidency. I think it started by asking a fundamental question about what the world looks like in the 21st century, how we reconcile people who have lost from globalisation and some of the reforms that have been undertaken in the late part of the 20th century with those who won. And I think his legacy will be that he asked those questions but didn't actually come up with any answers in the end.
Matt, was Bill Shorten right when he called Donald Trump barking mad?
Well, I don't think the Trump presidency was America's finest hour, Tom. You only need to look at the coronavirus pandemic and how badly the Trump administration have handled that. 400,000 people a day being infected. You know, the problems that that's caused for their health system, the inconsistency in the messages from the White House, and multilaterally as well. As the Trump presidency, you saw a contraction in the role of the United States throughout the world in things like the Paris Accord on climate change, the World Health Organization, and it's pleasing to see that one of the first acts of the Biden administration is to reverse some of those decisions, and we look forward to a more active, a more multilateral United States, and I think that that will be better for the world.
Already getting back into the Paris Climate Accord, climate is going to be a big priority from the Biden administration. It's going to change the equation, you'd think, the pressure around the world. There will be more pressure, Jason, won't there, on Australia to up its commitments, not just talk about what there is now.
Look, I think the big thing that we will need to do over the next 4 years, which we're going to do anyway, is more actively engage in the international forums on this issue. There is no doubt that what needs to happen internationally is that all nations need to come to the table. That includes us, obviously, and there needs to be, I think, more pressure put on everyone, including Australia, but, you know, on everyone to deliver on their commitments. Now, we're pretty confident that we can deliver on the commitments we've made. If we need to up some of those commitments, then we will ensure that they are done with plans that back up our capacity to deliver on those commitments. But it's, yeah, look, absolutely. Internationally, everyone has to step up, not just Australia.
Of course, not just Australia, but that's the point, isn't it? That the climate accord in Paris, we're not on track to achieve it by a long, long way. You said if we need to up it. What is the need? Do we need to regardless? Do we need to once other countries go first? Do we need to once the US asks us to? When does that need kick in?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tom. I think we're on track to meet our Paris obligations, and we will do that. And if we need to make adjustments to ensure that we do that, we will obviously make those policy adjustments. But the fact remains that if, to Matt's point, there needs to be more multilateral leadership on this, and if the United States can provide that, then that's an important clue. But there's no point, I think, at this point in time, you know, it's glossing over the fact that Australia has met its commitments, it's met its Kyoto commitments, it's on track to meet its...
I'm going to jump in, sorry, Jason. The NBN, not the best advertisement for the NBN today, I'm afraid, where you're coming from. We'll see if it improves. Matt Thistlethwaite, what about the equation in your party and those agitating against Labor being an ambitious party on climate change? Will this Biden administration perhaps silence that?
Well, I think there's no doubt that the Biden administration is going to be more forceful when it comes to climate change with nations like Australia, and that's probably a good thing. If we're going to solve the problem of climate change and ensure that we leave a safer, more sustainable future for our kids, Tom, we need to do it collectively. No one nation can solve it on its own. It's got to be done multilaterally. And unfortunately, Australia and over the last 4 years, the United States has been an outlier on this issue by its sluggish performance in tackling climate change. And you only need to look at this government's getting rid of an emissions trading scheme, trying to shut down the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, not investing in boosting renewables. All of these messages that sends to that collective of the world that's trying to deal with this issue is that Australia's not interested in taking stronger action on climate change. And I think
right.
now with the Biden administration becoming part of Paris again, we're going to see a much more forceful administration with nations like Australia, and that's a good thing.
I wanted to ask you finally both about, well, you're in New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian, the leader there. There seem to be two very different approaches on borders. Her approach, wait until there's a clear hotspot somewhere, a really well-established COVID one, before shutting the border and being able to manage any cases that have come in, which has happened in New South Wales. And the rest of the country, if there are a few cases, sometimes one case, borders up, straight away, no warning. What approach do you think is better for the country when you're balancing health and the economy, Matt?
Well, look, all along, Tom, we've said that you need to take the advice of the medical experts on this. And it's true that the different chief medical officers in different states have different views about how you handle that. But I think that that's the role for the Prime Minister and the National Cabinet to really come together and try and work out a consistent approach across those borders. And the National Cabinet did.
But that's the thing, the PM put up this national definition of a hotspot, and the other states and territories are just ignoring it. I mean, they've done that. He's done that with health advice. He's done that via the CHO, but it's been ignored. That's the reality, isn't it?
And some of those chief medical officers found fault with that definition. And I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not an expert in these things, and Labor's taken the approach of taking the advice of those experts on these decisions. So we support the decisions that have been made by the various states. Obviously, we want to see the economy open up as quickly as it possibly can, but it needs to be done safely, and we need to get to a vaccine as quickly as we possibly can.
Very quickly, Jason, I have been looking at a picture. It doesn't appear to have improved. So what have you got for us? Nearly out of time.
Well, Tom, I'd just say it's been incredibly disappointing. People haven't listened to the science on this. They haven't listened to the advice. They've played politics with the borders. And, you know, we haven't done what's been in the best interest of all Australians. And that's been disappointing.
Jason, Matt, we'll leave it there. A bit truncated today with a bit happening, but appreciate your time. Talk again